It's interesting to watch what's happened to this conference and this is number 4. Mm-hmm. It's great fun for us, and it allows us to try ideas out. And this group, the companies that come here, set our development objectives for the coming year. And a lot of it has to do with software and marketing.
This is a place we come every year to share a lot of the thinking that's going on at Redbird. What you saw on the screen and what you're going to hear about for the next couple of days is the next breakthrough. And it really comes, when you think about it, because the simulator, with avionics that have been replicated by a computer, can not only deliver to the student the exact characteristics that avionics would deliver in a cockpit, but the simulator can watch the student. The simulator can interact with the student. The simulator can do a walk around on the ground and talk to the student. The simulator, through trace technology and other things, can take people who literally have never flown in an airplane and have them doing short field takeoffs, flying the pattern, doing lazy 8s, doing steep rolls. We know this because that's what the Flying Challenge did.
And it was everywhere. It was media, it was mom and pop, it was retail, it was even the computer companies who were supposed to be good at this type of stuff. You know, they were getting disrupted, right? But it's interesting, but you didn't really choose. We actually did this research. We went out to 2000, to the global 2000. You know, but the big one was Kodak. You know, Kodak was, Kodak, Blockbuster type, but they're actually a verb. You know, like Kodak moment is now no longer a good thing. Disruption lesson number 1 is disruptive technologies didn't sneak up on anybody. I mean, it's not like, oh my God, there are these things called computers. So the technology future is forecastable. We know what's coming. We know what's coming. All right, type of thing. And so here, what we have is that we kind of sort of know where technology is heading. All right, so we know that, but where we start getting confused is, what are we supposed to do about it? What are we supposed to do about it? Kodak knew. Digital photography was not a surprise to Kodak. They invented it. They invented it. A wonderful guy named Steve Sassone, basically the engineer, he invented it, and he took it to senior management, and you know what they said? They said, cute, don't tell anybody about it. Honest to God truth. Honest to God truth. Unbelievable, right? They were aware, but they were in denial. They actually did market research. They basically had unambiguous basically decimal point precision that says, we are screwed. And they did not. That's an official strategic term, by the way. I mean, type of stuff, but unlike its founder, George Eastman, who twice adopted disruptive photographic technology, basically Kodak's management in the 80s and 90s were unwilling to consider digital as a replacement for film. They knew it was coming, and they did nothing about it. They knew it. And so people know. So the appropriate response to disruptive technology problem is not it's a missed opportunity, or, it's a surprise, sort of like a plane that takes off without you. Here's the deal. I'm trying to put this as an aviation metaphor. The problem is situational awareness. The problem is not understanding the impact. When you look at what's going to happen with this experiential training, basically, as if you had wandered on an airfield, which you thought was a metal, and the plane, flown by somebody else, ran over you during takeoff. That's bad. That's bad.
I spent 21 years at Douglas Aircraft. When it merged with Boeing, I then left for Cessna and spent quite some time there. But one of the takeaways that I had from a leadership perspective was that all of those companies and other peer companies that we competed against, and especially Redbird, and more importantly, bringing this home to all of you here with your companies, is that all of those companies that grew stronger had a couple things in common. And those things that were in common was they all embraced change. That was critically important to any of those companies. And embracing change, they knew that they had to take some risks, that was going to be part of the equation. To understand change, take the risks associated with that change. And it's been fascinating evolution over the aviation years to see where that has in fact played out in many, many ways. I go back to my early career looking at the big discussion around, do we move from, now there's some of you in the room, I can see age-wise, that won't even understand this concept, moving from drafting vellums to moving to a CAD system. And enormous debates internally where you're discussing, do I make that investment in technology or not? What's the real payback? Guy I work with, great guy, Fred Stevens, he would flat tell me he could make a drawing faster on a vellum than any young kid out of school could on a computer. And in fact, he probably could. But what he didn't realize in the change quotient was that they weren't teaching how to do it in development in school anymore, and that if you didn't embrace this change, you were going to get left behind. And you didn't see the larger, more comprehensive aspect of how bills of material now are going to be automated. It helped the supply chain. It created productivity. It created much more efficiency and a much more integrated system. But the other piece of that, besides embracing change and taking risks, was really some of the great companies also taking a leadership position in their industries to drive that change. And I'll use an example a little bit later as to where that was very, very, very true for Cessna Aircraft Company. And the reason I feel it's so important as far as the leadership piece of it, which again is why you're here in some of the discussions we'll have this afternoon, is there's the old saying that if you are not the lead dog, the scenery never changes. But really the key to that is, more importantly, that if you are the lead dog, you're really setting not only the pace but the direction as to where that industry or the industry that you're in can go.
We're going to talk about your students of the future. Who are they? What are they? Why are they? And most importantly is how we are going to teach them. One of the joys of being a professor is that each year, when the new year begins, I'm 1 year older and they're still 17. And that gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger, which usually means that I find myself as an anthropologist trying to figure out, who are they? Who are these kids? And not only who are these kids, but who will you be teaching? There's 4 large quadrants of demographics. We got the matures, we got the greatest generation basically, the boomers, the Gen Xers, and the millennials. Guess what? This is shrinking fast. Youngest World War II vet last weekend was 89 years old. We're the boomers. I'll be 62. We're shrinking. Gen X, shrinking. Millennials, and more importantly, digital natives are growing. When we say millennials, what are we talking about? We're talking about young people basically born between 78 and 94. I am the father of a millennial. When we talk about Generation Z, these are digital natives. You realize these kids are now entering college? Which means they're also in the Civil Air Patrol, which means what? That pretty soon you should be going after them. Or even more importantly, they should be coming after you. And then the young people of today are called the plurals. Why are they called the plurals? Because they are the first truly right brain, left brain individuals. You know what? Later on this evening, you're going to meet one of the original right brain, left brain individuals. His name was Leonardo da Vinci. How many of us wish our kids could be Leonardo da Vinci? Practically all of us. And what are we seeing? That the youngest generation that is coming up may actually possess or not possess the barriers that we have applied to right brain, left brain. That false division, that false bifurcation that has allowed whole generation to say, no, I'm just a geek. No, I'm just an artist, when nothing could be further from the truth. What are the numbers we're talking about? The numbers are gigantic. Millennials alone in the United States comprise 83 million inhabitants. If we add the digital natives, ladies and gentlemen, we add another 80 plus million. What does that mean? That means by 2016, over half of the United States will be comprised of digital natives. People who have grown up with technology as literally being part of who they are. That technology is now part of the human ontology. What do we mean by ontology? Logos, study of, ontos, being. That technology is part of who they are.
I am very passionate about proficiency because I consider myself to be a very lucky pilot. Industry is made up of a lot of people that fly light airplanes. I can name many, many CEOs that built an airplane, fly an airplane, own their own grass strip, Industry right now is just chock full of small airplane pilots. And so there's a unique moment in time where we're not really talking about the guy-in-back aircraft. We're talking about the private pilot type of aircraft. And yeah, we want you guys to go make pro-pilot candidates to fly the line and fly charter. But there's this unique opportunity to meet the general aviation recreational pilot in a way that's never been true before, and industry is excited about this. And then we have AOPA, EAA, and GAMA that are in this very enlightened alignment right now, which is we got to build pilots. And once we win one, we got to make that pilot fly safely for a long time. And you don't get them to fly safely for a long time by reading accident reports. That's how you get their attention. You get them to fly safely for a long time by skill building.
Okay, Trace, would you open the doors for us, please? All right, they're taxiing up a Red Hawk right now. It's been running and doing a circuit in the pattern. This represents your instructor and customer coming back to the ramp. Watch the screen. We just pushed a new bunch of data automatically as a download from that last flight. That data is now being captured into what we're going to call the Connected Flight School, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. How this data is put in is a discussion of what we're going to do and what we're going to get your feedback on later today about what you want to see in that. And if we can jump on back now to the slideshow presentation. Well, let's talk about this first. This is an automatically generated report that is looking at some prop RPMs, target RPMs, example, it's giving you some maintenance data from the flight that just happened. All of this data is being collected by a single box inside the airplane and transmitting that back to you automatically when the plane returns. That data is going to include lots of stuff. It's going to include AHRS data. It's going to include an accelerometer. It's going to include data that came from any of the things that you find interesting in terms of engine parameters or flight performance or where the airplane was. Did you get too close to protected airspace? Was altitude a problem? All those kinds of things are going to be available to you, and you're going to decide how you want to manage those. Trace, let's go back to the actual presentation. And that's going to happen inside the Connected Flight School. And as I came back from Red Hawk, it occurred to me, wow, I've got some catching up to do here, and I just really don't have the time in my life to do this in the next couple of months. So what the real problem here is, we have too many reporting systems inside the flight school. It relies a lot on manual entry, which creates errors, which creates more personnel that you need to correct the errors. There's too little actionable data for the people who actually have to make changes. And it doesn't allow you to generate the reports that you want or any ad hoc queries that are of any real value to you. So let's look at the Connected Flight School and how that works. At the heart of it is a database program. And that database program gets information from the airplanes in the simulator and reports information back and forth to the training department, the training managers, accounting, and to maintenance. It transmits all of that data, as you saw, back to the flight school upon landing.
I dreamed of flight. I knew that once we tasted it, we would walk the earth with our eyes turned ever skyward. But those dreams of flight began with birds. Birds fascinated me. I watched them, sketched them, borrowed ideas from them for my inventions. For you see, a bird is an instrument working according to mathematical law. Therefore, it is within the capacity of humankind to reproduce. My earliest aeronautical designs were clearly influenced by birds. These machines would use flapping wings to generate both lift and propulsion, or so I thought. I contemplated the pilot being prone, standing vertically, using arms and using legs. But it turns out the big human is weak compared to the little bird. Human muscle power and the physical endurance pales in comparison with our winged friends. So, if going from the ground into the air would prove too difficult, I would concentrate instead on going from the air back to the ground safely. Allora, I give you the parachute. The idea of the parachute was to reduce a person's terminal velocity so as to make a long fall survivable. It's a pyramid-shaped framework and a structure, was covered with cloth, and would allow any man to throw himself off a great height and land without suffering any injury. But to be honest with you, I never tried it myself. I'm too old for that sort of thing. I was the father of the helicopter. Well, maybe the grandfather. My aerial screw was like a giant whirling pinwheel. The blades of this helicopter were to be made out of linen. And when turned fast enough, air pressure would build up under the blades, thus forcing the flying machine into the sky. But again, human power alone was not able to generate the necessary lift.